All right, I've just turned the recording back on. We're coming back from our breakout. I'm going to now ask and see if there's any questions. Does anybody have any questions about the tools now that they've had a chance to talk to their peers a little bit? Okay, if you've got a question, raise a hand. And since I don't see any hands, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Okay, so if you ever run into trouble with tools and whatnot, feel free to give myself a call or an email. And also, Laura's pretty sharp on this stuff too at this point in time. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to switch over to my celebrity interview. And I'm going to stop share to go ahead and do that. And my celebrity interview today, what I'd like to do is introduce you to Chester Matkey. So Chester has 4 years of experience in lean, all those at Zodiac Aerospace down in Santa Maria. Chester's a Cal Poly IE grad. Zodiac, I think, was your first position. And saying he's only got 4 years experience, I think Chester, it must have been like day one or something that we met up. So I feel like I've known you forever. Maybe
yeah.
Sort of paralleled the development of Central Coast Lean, really. So currently, Chester is a Lean Project Engineer 2 at Zodiac Aerospace. Chester, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So what I want to do is I'm going to ask you a question here. What's your current position and what's its relationship to Lean? So what is a Lean Project Engineer 2 at Zodiac Aerospace?
So it's kind of funny, right? Depending on who you ask, whether it's HR or my boss or my boss's boss or the floor, what my title is, you'll get a whole bunch of different answers. But really what I'd say is just kind of a Lean leader, supporter. My kind of day-to-day just has to deal with problem solving on different scales, teaching Lean concepts to people. And so, the relationship to Lean is we're kind of the focal points at the facility.
Okay.
So just kind of a quick heads up about the company. Our division in Santa Maria is about 1,500 people right now. There's about 5 of us dedicated in the Lean thinking, Lean manufacturing department.
Yeah, that was going to be a question. So you got five people supporting your Lean effort there at Santa Maria, huh?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So can you tell me a little bit about your Lean journey? We've all got a place where we've sort of got started or heard about Lean. Tell me a little bit about how you came to your position.
Sure. So I can remember hearing about Lean in one of my classes. I don't know which one. I don't know what professor. But it was one of those kinds of brushing over the subjects just to get you familiar with some of the words, to let you know, hey, Toyota kind of started this idea. But how it really started was after I'd gotten hired for Zodiac, I was a manufacturing engineer. And that's kind of a blend of industrial manufacturing specialties as it relates to Cal Poly studying. And about 6-7 months in, we got this new Lean expert who was consulting. And he just casually mentioned in one of the meetings, if anybody's more interested in these concepts, please come to me, we'll see what we can do. And so, I went and read up on it for maybe a couple days, a week. And at the next meeting when he was there, after the meeting, I hung back and said, hey, this sounds really cool. How can I get more into it? Is there any projects I can join? And I think in less than a month, my title had gotten transferred and I was in that department instead.
Boy, so it was sort of a fast baptism into the field.
Yeah, it's a baptism by fire,
expert, right?
Yeah.
So what's your current Lean challenge? Do you have any sort of big things you're working on? Or
so we've done the same project now about twice, almost exact, and it looks like we're about to do it a third time. And the only difference is the product we're doing it with and the people, the manufacturing line. But the idea is to go into a production line. For those of you who don't know about Zodiac Aerospace, we build seats for airplanes. And so some of our customers will be Delta Airlines or American Airlines. So right now, I'm currently working with an Asian airline called Cathay. We're building their seats and trying to figure out how to hit rate. That's kind of the blanket statement. What's the rate need to be per day of whatever widget, component, seat that we need to build? and how do we get that through every department. And so it's a pretty broad problem. We have a couple kind of tactics we've used before. We just finished doing this with American Airlines, and it sounds like we're about to get transferred to another airlines as well. So that's kind of the current challenge. If I was to tell you about the problem about executing that, I would say, and this is really hard for me to grasp studying, engineering and believing in the holy sanctity of numbers, was that you really have to win over hearts before you win over minds, right? So I would throw up graphs and data and say we're making such improvement. And people say, yeah, that's great. And, you think a lot of times everything's run on numbers, right? In school, you're taught it runs on grades, or you have to hit this mark, or whatever, quantitative level you have to jump over. But when you're out on the floor working with people, a lot more than I expected, it had to do with, how do you convince this person to keep doing whatever it is that gets those numbers? So oftentimes their output might not be directly reflective of something they care about. So how do you make it a job easier for them? Or how do you make a job faster so they have a longer break? Or different things, like how do you make it so that they don't have to come in on the weekend? And that was really kind of the carrot, the thing I had to learn about, and then have to try over and over again to do in order to get people to help me fix my problem of rate.
Yeah, excellent, interesting. So, Chester, besides from your current problem, we've all had these either really good lean successes, or we've had really big lean failures. Regardless whether it's a success or a failure, we've learned some things from those experiences. What do you think your greatest lean success or lean failure has been?
Yeah, that's difficult. There's been so many failures. I would say one of the best things to learn, or one of the things I'd say to take to heart if you're interested in lean, is learning how to fail. I'll say that's kind of the blanket statement, right? So if you talk about the PDCA cycle, or, you just mentioned Professor Olson, the Dominick cycle or anything, they're all cycles, right? It's not to get to an end result. Eventually you have to do it again. You have to iterate and do it over and over and over. And oftentimes doing it over means that you failed the first time. So you have to try a second time and a third time and a fourth time. I would say maybe one of the biggest examples of repeated failures, and so learning something from it at our company, is 5S. So implementation of 5S almost always comes under some kind of lean branch, or if your company is not big enough to have its own lean branch, it has to do with production or operations on the floor. And every year it seems like there's some new VP of Ops or new CEO, and they want to make this big push to make the floor clean and sparkly and shiny. And so we launch out another big, 5S initiative. And the fifth S, as we all know, is the hardest, sustain. And so, it'll have a lot of steam going the first month, 2 months, 3 months, and then it'll start to peter off. And 6 months, 8 months down the road, it seems like we're back at step one. So I would say that's been one of the biggest failures. But the important thing to learn again, I'd say, is learning what motivates people. And it's not necessarily just, the bosses, although that can be, a strong motivator. You want to make sure your boss is happy with your performance. But for the average Joe on the floor, the person at the front desk or anybody in the company, if they're a part of this project or are some kind of input into what you're doing, what do you have to do? How do you sell them on a concept so that they want to keep doing it? You really have to. I've learned that lean's a lot about bettering other people's lives. Or that's the way to make it sustainable. And if you don't, right, if you just say, well, this will increase our rate from 7 to 10, well, that doesn't really mean a whole lot to a guy's life if you're making him work harder. So trying to figure out what's the carrot for them? How will they do something so that it's going to make their life easier or more enjoyable, or something they're more apt to want to do? So 5S has been a big challenge. Another failure, I'd say, and it kind of ties in with the 5S, would be just the general amount of education, lean education that our floor receives. So oftentimes, we'll forget our placement. Hey, like Eric mentioned, I've been doing this for 4 years. I've been doing a lot of reading. Our team does a weekly article. And so I'm coming in at a certain level of I already know what I'm talking about, or I use, Japanese terms. That was one thing that one of my bosses taught us was, you have all these fancy Japanese terms, but that's going to be really off-putting to a beginner. So what's a way you can translate it or put it into, some analogy that makes sense to them? And I think that I personally could do a much better job of that, trying to teach the concepts to the floor, being cognizant of where you're at as compared to, whoever you're talking to, whether that's, somebody who's further on the lean journey than you are, or like I was saying, somebody who's just starting, making it accessible to them is really key.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that, Chester. So, I think, a lot of us in Lean and Six Sigma have our favorite tools or our favorite go-to tools that we like to use. What's your favorite tool?
My favorite tool, I might break your heart here a little bit, Eric, but my favorite tool, I don't know if I have a favorite tool. For me, it comes back to Lean. Lean as a whole is about a way of thinking, right? So I think that's why it's spread from car manufacturing to manufacturing in general, to banking, to healthcare, to the whole gamut. You can take it further and take it out of business. How do you apply Lean concepts to your personal life? Is your kitchen organized in a way so that when you cook, you're not always having to walk back and forth to the pantry, the stuff you need right there. And so I'd say having that mindset, kind of I'll say the Lean mindset, right? Always looking to make that next improvement, that next little step. Being ready to try to learn new ideas with the end goal being that you want to improve, right? The end, and it's kind of funny, I say end goal, right? But there's not really an end goal. It's to continuously improve. So without kind of having that drive, it can be very difficult, right? If you're breaking it down into, this is my A3, this is my project. And, I started at level A and I want to get to, 3 times that by the end. But then by the time you get to the end of it, just staying there really kind of defeats the point of Lean, right? Once you get to whatever output you wanted at the end of that, again, it's that iteration. What do you do to get to the next step? What do you do to get to the next step? Right. And instilling that in people is very difficult. But part of the challenge, part of the love of it, trying to get them to always want to do better. I remember in the 5S effort, we'd come up with this pretty cut and dry yes-no audit, had 40 questions on it. And Gerald, one of the operators, great guy in one of the areas, was trying week after week to make an improvement in his area. And at first, the highest score in the facility was maybe like a 15 out of 40, right? It was this garbage score. And, his group was the first to get to 20. And so I said, all right, well, but you think you can do 25? And his was the first group to get to 25, first group to get to 30, first group to get to 35. And he would look at me every time and say, I'm going to get you, Chester. I'm going to get that 40 out of 40. And I remember looking back at him and telling him, when it gets to 40 out of 40, we're going to come up with another 60 bullets and you'll be at 40 out of 100. And I kind of saw him deflate, but it kind of also clicked for him, it doesn't end, right? There is no perfect score. You need to always set a higher bar.
Right. It's interesting. You know that for this class, all the students have to do their mini project, which is apply 10 tools. And whenever we have our celebrity speaker, we ask this question of what's their favorite tool. And I would challenge our students, Chester kind of threw out there this idea of lean mindset actually being a tool that you're giving your people, right? So you give this operator was somehow given this lean mindset to carry forward. If you can describe that or present that as something that you did as part of your project, gave a set of operators this lean mindset or developed some sort of training or example or exercise that did that, I would count that, right? So I think that's a great improvement. It's a great tool to use. Thank you, Chester, for sharing that.
Sure.
At this point, what I want to do is open it up to questions from our students that are currently online. So if you've got some questions for Chester and have some things to ask, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll go ahead and recognize you. So let's get a question. Let's see, we got one ringer there from Santa Maria. There we go. I knew this was coming. All right, Dominick, what do you got for Chester?
I couldn't help myself. Chester, I don't know if you know me. I also work at Zodiac.
Oh, really?
Yes. So a couple of things, and just to spin kind of the question. So I do have a couple of questions for you. You talked about motivators for a new lean practitioner. What have you seen as the most impactful motivators?
I think it comes back to this idea of, from our perspective in just manufacturing, right? It comes back to this idea that it's not just a job, right? You may be paid to come here and, sell coffee at Starbucks or crank out 40 widgets a day or whatever. But there's a much deeper satisfaction if you're doing something for your own self, right? I don't know if you ever heard of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivators. And so part of, I think, one of the easiest ways to get through to people is to give them that intrinsic motivation. How do you make it feel so that they're more bought in themselves? And the way that I think I try to present it is, how do we make this job, again, better for you? So if you make this change, it'll make your life easier in your department, right? It might not necessarily lead to an uptick in whatever the metrics are in that area, but does it make your life easier, right? Does it make it better for you? Whether that's something like ergonomics, right? So that's one of the first things I do. I'll go into an area and try to help them with their ergonomics. If you have to walk back and forth somewhere all the time, yeah, I always have to go over here, grab this 5-gallon bucket and move it to my desk. All right, well, why don't we just make an area in your workstation for that 5-gallon bucket and you don't have to do that. Or, if we can get you the right tools you need so you don't have to continuously move around, it's always on hand, it's not lost. Then they see that benefit and then they start to volunteer ideas themselves. Okay, well, I can do this. I can ask for this tool even if, it wasn't given to me. I came up with this idea myself. If we had this, it would make the job better. And that kind of starts getting a wheel going in their head where they look more and more at their own job, at their own tasks with kind of a questioning mind rather than taking it for what it's worth, at face value.
Sure. And then just to follow up on that, because of the tool question, right? Mm-hmm. But, what are some that you have seen that are misused often, but not by yourself, but or maybe within the facility, but that you have seen kind of also diminish that, and work against a motivator?
I think the first one that just jumped into my mind would be visual controls. And so, a visual management board, having somewhere for people to meet and represent. At our facility, as you know, Dominick, all across the facility, we have SQCD, which stands for safety, quality, cost, delivery. And each of those are tied to, some metric. There's a bar chart. There'll be, action lists attached to them. But most of the time they're being used by management to just come into an area for 3 minutes, see the metric and leave. It's not, using the metric so that the people gain something out of it. Again, if you're going to put something up on the wall, don't make it wallpaper, right? Have it be something useful for them. Okay, well, we're going to ask you how many units you made today. Well, why is that important? Well, because, you've been coming around asking this question every day for the past 30 days. And every time you ask it, I don't have a good answer. So I got to go spend 30 minutes counting.
Sure.
But if now you kind of show them, oh, well, why don't you just keep, a tally on the board of how many you did yesterday, how many you did today, and now you don't have to go do that 30 minutes of work that I ask you every day. Instead, you glance at a board for 10 seconds and we have a little conversation about it. I would say that it's, instead of having metrics be something that's just reporting kind of spewed in a one direction from the floor up to a manager, and then they take that up to their manager and so on and so forth ad infinitum. It needs to be a two-way conversation. All right, here's our metrics for yesterday. And then the boss needs to ask back, well, you hit your target, great, what went well? Or you didn't hit your target, what didn't go well? What can I do to help you? To me, that's a conversation, not a kind of a one-way street.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, excellent. I like that. All right. Any other questions for Chester? So I have a question for you, Chester. So, one of the things I've always seen, and you've experienced this too, I think, at Central Coast Lean, we have forums and workshops. They go one of two ways. One is, give me a workshop on how I convince my leadership to do lean. And then the other way is, how do I convince my employees to do lean? So this is that middle position, right? You're going up and you're going down.
Right.
What do you think is sort of the thing people can do most is sort of, let's go with the leadership first. You've kind of talked a lot about, how employees get buy-in with the what's in it for them. Like what do you think of going up, like to have people convince their management to do this stuff?
That's a great question. And I would say the quick answer is numbers, but for some reason it doesn't always convince them. And I'll go kind of with this example. When we did the project with American Airlines, the end of last year, the beginning of this year, it was to increase rate, right? We needed to get an area up from building the equivalent of 2 seats a day to 4 or 6 seats a day. So, okay, we laid out how many parts we need to get out of this area. And they said, if you need more people, okay, but can you do it with the people you have, right? So that's a pretty difficult task. Make productivity go up by 200-300%. And we input some things, and they were all not expensive things, had more to do about these recurring processes of we meet each day as a manager or, support staff. We're here to remove the operator's roadblocks. Right. And within a month, 2 months, we proved that we could do it, right? We had not increased staff and we're able to increase the throughput. And, day over day, we're showing this metric where, hey, we hit that target you said, we cranked out X number of widgets and it's at the new goal and everybody was happy. But then, a month goes by, our team kind of gets moved to another department. And for some reason, I would say the local leadership, middle management, maybe it didn't set in or they didn't take it to heart, or maybe the upper management didn't follow up with them regularly enough to show its importance. But after a month, 2 months, they kind of started sliding back slowly but surely to kind of the original baseline. So it worked in the beginning, right? You always make I'll say the sales pitch when you go into an area. Hey, we're going to give you this much value in this much time. But then trying to keep that sustained, I think it takes a lot more of that engagement between every level, which is very difficult, right? You can have a great, let's say, supervisor over their people, right? But if their manager doesn't ask them for things all the time, it doesn't go up that next chain. And if the manager's never asked by the VP of operations, then it doesn't go up that next chain, so on and so forth. So it really has to do with this, getting this tightly knit, organization all together, taking the time to kind of reach down to every level to care about what they're doing.
Yeah. I think in our approach with this class, using the DMAIC process, so you got define, measure, analyze, improve, and then control. Yeah, we've got control elements like standard work or control charts that we can use, but there is a real key role that management plays, right? In making sure those things are maintained and asking for those control elements to be in place so that you don't get that backsliding effect, because we do see that a lot, right?
Right. And, with controls, I was thinking again about another tool that gets misused. And as soon as you said standard work, I went, yep, at our facility. And what we often miss at our shop is that standard work's not there to make you do it this way every time, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but to me, the opinion for standard work is you have a standard so that when you come up with something better, right, you adjust the standard work. You have some document of, we tried this, it didn't work, okay, go back to the standard work. We tried this, it's better, let's stick with it. And that concept often gets missed with the operators. They just look at, oh God, here's another, tone Chester put on the floor. When really it's, hey, does this reflect what you're doing? If not, we'll adjust it. And then can you think of better ways? And as we have better and better ways, we add to that.
Right. It's real hard to get better if you don't know what you're currently doing, right?
Exactly, right.
So, okay, well, good. Do we have any other questions for Chester? All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a last question, Chester, for you. And so we've got a lot of anxious students that are learning about Lean and Six Sigma. And what advice would you have for them just starting out on their Lean journey?
So I was listening to a podcast the other day. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Tim Ferriss, nothing related to Lean, but it's just kind of an entrepreneur who's written a couple books. But he had a really interesting talk on the other day. And it kind of linked back to a lean concept. And when I thought about it, I attribute to, a lot of the success, I'd say that, the teams I've been on it have, or the success that I've been, thankful enough to be a part of. And it has to do with, I'd say, setting others up for success, right? So there's this concept, it's a Japanese word, I know I said not to use Japanese words, called nemawashi. And it's this idea, I think it literally translates to something about like clipping the ground or clearing the ground around the roots. And the idea is that before you start a project, before you want to make a change or do something, you go around to all the people this change would affect and kind of test the waters with them. Hey, we want to move this couple workstations over here because it'll be a shorter walk. Okay, well, who's impacted by that? Well, we got to go talk to, their managers. Their manager okay with that? No, maybe it causes, them extra work because they have to walk farther. Or testing base with the people who drop off their parts, or, anybody that's affected by this change. You go around one-on-one and kind of touch bases, clear the water, and people are a lot more comfortable with that, right? If you go around and just casually ask them, hey, would you be okay with this? And once you kind of get all that agreement built in, then you send the email, then you have the meeting, then you present it up to management or whoever, and it just kind of, hey, thanks everybody, here's the new plan, this is what we're going to do, Joe's got this, Sally's got this, Sue's doing this, and it just all falls into place. And I'd say doing that prep work, setting things up for success before trying for it, makes you look really good at meetings, makes them like meetings, because your meeting doesn't take an hour where you're talking to all these people. It takes 10 minutes because everybody's already agreed to this.
Right, so you got the buy-in.
Right. I would say that's been really useful to me, especially, I'll stereotype here and say, especially for us millennials, for the younger crowd, right? We kind of go in and we know how it should be, and, we're just going to send out an email and, well, now I've talked to them. But a lot of people have different ways of communicating, doing that one-on-one, touching bases, kind of building up the agreement, kind of the support for you before you make that request, before you propose that solution, means that once you do, everything, all the dominoes fall into place. I thought that was kind of a really interesting idea. It's definitely made meetings go by faster, which every manager, if any of you have ever worked, God, meetings consume too much of everybody's life. I would say that's a great strategy.
Yeah.
The other one, and I kind of touched bases on it, was that iteration, right? Not being afraid to fail, because the faster you can fail, the faster you can get to success. So one of my big problems, and I'll stereotype again and say, a lot of engineers' problems is we'll pour over something and we'll try to, we'll spend a week on it to just get every little nook and cranny perfect and, make all the moving parts of the system work. And then we go and put it out, on day one, and something you didn't notice just completely throws it for a loop. If you had just, kind of cobbled something together, tried it, and it falls apart, and then you learn really quickly, you can much faster get into figuring out the better way of doing it. So kind of rapid adjustments, rapid iterations, was something that personally took a lot for me to break through, right? I was the perfectionist, right? Get it all right, turn in something good. But if you can go faster, don't be afraid to fail, as long as you keep going until you succeed.
Right. Yeah, I think like one of the terms people use for that is tri-storming, right? As opposed to brainstorming, tri-storming is good. And I also want to go back. I love that concept of nemawashi, but I heard the translation was, let's go have a beer.
Okay, yeah.
And that's the kind of, works also, right?
Right. Yeah, I think, oh man, whose class was it? I had a class with one of my professors. I can't remember what it was for, but the first homework assignment was, okay, here's your groups, and nobody knew who was in their groups. I think it was like a general elective, so it was all different kinds of majors, and his first assignment was go grab a beer. He's like, you don't have to get a beer, if you're not over 21, but go out and do something fun, right? Just something to break the ice. And as dumb as it sounds, you think about it, you're like, oh, that's not really going to work. And that was one of the best groups I had in college. It was the one that we just went out and just talked and learned a little bit about each other, because then there was that trust.
Right.
I would say the same thing at work when I've had the opportunity to. I'll say, okay, we're a new team. Let's just go grab tacos together, Taco Tuesday. And those are the teams that, again, have that intrinsic motivation. Hey, I want to do this for my team because those are my teammates and I like them, versus oh God, I got to go to Chester's meeting again. Yeah, I would say that's definitely a good translation there.
And Chester, you're throwing out some great ideas. So if I get some mini projects back and said, the thing we implemented was Taco Tuesday, improve communication, because that was
I
like
take all blame for that.
cause on our fishbone diagram. Was a communication problem. We'll give you credit.
Sounds good.
All right, Chester. Well, thank you so much for talking to us tonight, and I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my slides, and a lot less entertaining than talking to you, but I really appreciate you, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good one, guys.
All right, take care, Chester. All right, bye-bye. All right, I am going to go ahead and turn off our recording. So I've got Chester.